let's start at the top with the Angels. We're going to go alphabetically. And the Angels first in our own DVR's heart. We have to do a little shout out here for Derek Van Riper, our normal host. I'm bumbling along trying to approximate even 50% of what he can do. He is the proud father of a new young baby boy, and they are resting. Well, I wouldn't say resting. There's a lot of crying and not much sleeping, but that's what they're up to right now. And I'm shout out to Derek and hope everything's all right over there. I'm going to bring by a little gift soon here from the Athletic Head HQ. We got a future subscriber onesie. But he always, his whole thing with the Angels was he felt like every year he sort of bought into the hype and he could cross his eyes and see a future for the Angels. And it's not that hard when you're talking about a team that has two of the top 10 players in the league in Shohei Ohtani and Mike Trout. But it's always a question of depth and all those other pieces. Is there enough there in your estimation for the Angels, or what part of the what hole will show up in the ship and sink the ship this year?
I'm glad you know where I'm going with this. I mean, if you've listened to this podcast every now and then, you probably hear me as the local Angels hater. I refuse to be excited about them, not because they don't have exciting players. Obviously they do, but because it's the same story every single time. So for me, when I'm looking at the Angels, do I think that they're going to compete for the AL West? I don't. I mean, they have the World Series winning team in their division. They have the Mariners who are up and coming. We'll get to the Rangers. Do I think that they'll be interesting to watch? Of course. With a healthy Ohtani and a healthy Trout, anything is interesting. But I think when you're looking at the biggest questions of establishing a successful season up to the Angel status, I think it's pretty fair to say that an Angel successful season looks vastly different than a Mariners successful season. The two biggest questions I have for the Angels is Anthony Rendon going to be healthy this year? And I think I share that question with the overwhelming majority of baseball. And two, how's the rotation? Because you're looking at the heart of the order for the Angels, and we'll run it back. We'll run it down from the two hole. We have Trout, Ohtani, Rendon if he's healthy, Hunter Renfroe, and Brandon Drury. That's a pretty respectable middle of the order, but that's only half of the game, obviously. And I think the big concerns for me is after Ohtani on the other side, is that Angels rotation going to be enough to give this heart of the order at least a shot to produce or have their production even matter?
Yeah, I think that's fair. We've shined the spotlight a lot at shortstop in the past, and we've faith casted probably every free agent shortstop onto these Angels so far, and they've decided to kind of go with the flotsam and jetsam approach. I don't know. That might be unfair, but I mean, with all the possible free agents that could have signed in Anaheim, the depth chart now reads Luis Rengifo, Giovanni Urshela, David Fletcher, Anthony Velasquez. I think Velasquez might be the only true shortstop of the four. And defensively, offensively, there's things that all of them do sort of well. And with Fletcher is an extreme contact guy, and Urshela is okay contact with okay power, and Rengifo has some power, but I just don't know that I see them any of them defensively. And we're going to see a little bit more importance on defense this year with the shifting rules. So I'm interested to see how that goes. But yes, Rendon is the guy that stretches it from a true, I would say, if I was planning for this team, I'd be afraid of Mike Trout. I'd be afraid of Shohei Ohtani. I'd be afraid of Taylor Ward to some extent. And I'd be afraid Hunter Renfroe takes me deep. And then you get the bottom of the lineup where I'm not as afraid. But if Rendon, you stick in there, that's just, it extends the lineup another one. It makes it a little bit harder to pitch to. So I think that is an issue. In this rotation, I see Tyler Anderson as a competent pitcher. I think Patrick Sandoval, I don't like his fastball. I don't think it's very good, but I think he's at least competent. Reed Detmer showed something with a new slider late last year. So, 4 deep, you're doing pretty well, except that Ohtani means that you pretty much have to go 6 in this rotation. And that's going to put pressure on young guys like Chase Silthet. That name I don't know what it is about that name. I cannot say it. Chase Silseth.
That's a tricky one in your defense.
It's one of the, it's like a tongue twister. Tucker Davidson, who came over, Griffin Canning. I mean, it's a bunch of young guys that are untested, and two of them have to pitch. Correct. Like from day one. Like it's not even, that's the kind of thing when you look at the back end of that rotation, it's the kind of thing where you're like, oh, they've got 5, and then these are the guys behind the 5.
Right.
These guys are in the 6. And then another thing that pops out at me too is when I just look at the Fangraphs projections for this team is they've got the worst projected bullpen. It's the worst.
30 out of 30?
It's wow. 30 out of 30. They're actually okay with the rotation and say it's sort of an upper half rotation, which if everything goes right, I could see it, I guess. But they do not like that bullpen. And this has not been a team in the past that has done a great job at finding guys in the bullpen. You know, there are teams like the Rays that seem to just, you know, create new ace relievers every year. This has not been what the Angels have done. On the flip side, like if there is hope, like you kind of want, like, what if someone was, if there was somebody that was going to step forward this year that hadn't really done it before? Is there a younger player on this team, or is it just still Rendon, or is there anybody who catches your eye as being like, man, if this person has a really great year, it could be really big for the Angels?
You know, I don't necessarily think of Taylor Ward as being a young guy, but I do think he can be a game changer. I mean, you mentioned how Rendon can lengthen the lineup. I think Taylor Ward can easily do that as well from the leadoff spot. You can pitch around guys if you have 2 or 3 big bats in that lineup. Opposing pitchers can pitch around that pretty successfully. But if you have guys like Taylor Ward or a Brandon Drury, those are guys that lengthen that lineup and make that even more difficult. And there's not a lot of holes for them to avoid. So again, I think the advantage for the Angels, if they're going to be successful relative to their terms, is going to be they're going to have to hit their way to it, which is why I think Taylor Ward's performance, especially at the top of the order, setting the table for guys like Trout and Ohtani, is really imperative.
Yeah. I'm going to do a deep pull here. It's not going to be, I don't think I mean it as in this guy alone will make the difference, but it's representative of what I think they need, which is they have a guy, Zach Weiss, who came over, and you know, he's a 30-year-old reliever that was last seen in Seattle. You know, he's had some issues with command, but he has great stuff. I mean, he got swinging strikes on almost 17% of the pitches he threw last year. You know, great strikeout stuff. They need guys like that. I mean, if this is projected to be the worst bullpen in baseball, they need guys like Zach Weiss. They need somebody to be like, who? And that person needs to suddenly be one of the top, you know, 15 relievers in the AL, you know, somebody that just steps forward and has a great year. Because Estevez, Jimmy Herget, you know, Matt Moore, Aaron Loop, they're credible guys. They need someone to step out of nowhere into the limelight and be an amazing reliever. I think that could be really huge for this team. So, you know, if things go right, I think we know what the story is. It's going to be health. Maybe one of these, you know, like 1 or 2 or 3 starting pitchers in general just step forward. But what you know what it looks like when it goes bad, right?
Yeah, I think we've got about a decade of that in our pockets lately.
Just re-rack what's happened every time. Maybe they're due. I mean, that's a gambler's fallacy, but maybe they're due. You know, like this one year they got to have everything go right. So I think the one thing I do like about what they've done is in, you know, signing guys like Brett Phillips and Brandon Drury and getting Gio Urshela there. They are a little bit more set up against injury on the hitting side. You know what I mean? I feel like if somebody gets hurt for a little bit, you know, they have guys that can step forward, particularly on the infield. They go too deep with credible major leaguers at every position on the infield.
Yeah, I would agree with you there. I would agree that they're a more versatile ball club than I was expecting them to be over the winter. I think there is some opportunity for some flexibility, and for a team that does have, I mean, every team has their fair share of injury problems, but we've been talking about Rendon being injured for 2 years. Having some infield flexibility and some depth there certainly doesn't hurt. I'll give the Angels a +1 there. And, look, it's not like they went out there and didn't have a good offseason. They got the upgrades and went out and incrementally upgraded the team in the best ways they knew possible. It's not going to be enough, and I don't think anyone was really expecting that, but at least there are certain areas where Angels fans can kind of take a deep breath and say, okay, there is some flexibility here. We do have some versatility here. There is some depth. There is somewhat of a game plan if things start to inevitably go sideways.
Yeah, and maybe some young names. Silthers himself actually has a pretty filthy
Nice.
filthist splitter. Oh man, that's a whole sentence that I'm going to screw up like 8 different ways. And Griffin Canning has a really good breaking ball if he can be healthy. So there are some young arms, and those are the guys that'll take him further.